Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The first thing I felt was cold, then sticky, then the smell of red wine rising off silk. Vanessa stood in front of me with an empty glass in her hand and that polished little smile she used whenever she wanted to humiliate someone without looking emotional. "Oh my God," she said loudly so the room would hear her. I thought security was supposed to keep uninvited guests out. A few people laughed. Not many. Just enough. We were standing in the center of a ballroom filled with nearly 200 people, crystal chandeliers overhead, cameras near the stage, executives and investors gathered to celebrate what everyone kept calling the deal of the decade. $1 billion. That number had been on every screen in the room all night. And Vanessa had just poured Cabernet down the front of my dress like I was something she could erase in public. I looked at her. Then at Martin, our former CEO, standing beside her with his hand still wrapped around his champagne flute, not stopping her, not even pretending to. He actually smirked. That was the moment I knew they still thought I was the same woman they pushed out 6 months earlier. Embarrassed. Isolated. Easy to bury. They had no idea who had just walked into the ballroom behind them, or whose name was on the other side of their billion-dollar deal. My name is Claire Bennett. 6 months before that night, I was head of strategic partnerships at Halston Hospitality Group, the company throwing that party. I'd spent 8 years there. I built their expansion model, negotiated their biggest licensing agreements, and helped position them for the international growth they were now celebrating like it had fallen out of the sky. It hadn't. I built most of it in windowless conference rooms, on flights I barely slept through, and during weekends when everyone else was home pretending work-life balance was real. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't loud. I was the person who made sure the numbers held up when the room got quiet and someone important asked hard questions. And for a long time, that mattered. Vanessa knew that better than anyone. She started at Halston 4 years after I did. I trained her myself. She was smart, ambitious, charming in a way that made people underestimate how calculated she really was. At first, I liked her. More than liked her, actually. I trusted her. I gave her credit in rooms where she hadn't earned it yet. I covered for her mistakes. I introduced her to Martin when she was still trying to get face time with leadership. Within 2 years, she was promoted twice. Within 3, she stopped taking my calls unless there were witnesses. It started small. Meetings moved without me. Decks I created were presented under someone else's name. Martin began saying things like, "Claire's great with details, but Vanessa really sees the big picture." That line got repeated a lot. Usually by people using my work. Then the numbers started changing. Nothing dramatic at first. Forecasts that suddenly looked cleaner than the underlying data. Occupancy rates rounded up before quarter close. Vendor expenses routed through a consulting firm I'd never heard of, but somehow no one wanted to explain. When I asked questions, Martin got irritated. When I kept asking, Vanessa got cold. One afternoon, I walked into a meeting and saw my own expansion plan on the screen with Vanessa's name on the title page. She didn't even flinch. Afterward, I confronted her in her office and shut the door. "You could have at least changed the wording," I said. She leaned back in her chair like I was bothering her during lunch. "You need to stop being territorial," she said. "This is what leadership looks like." That was the first time I understood exactly who she was. Not insecure. Not confused. Hungry. And once Martin realized she would protect him no matter what, I was the obvious problem. 2 weeks later, I was called into legal. They said I was being transitioned out as part of an executive restructuring. They offered me a severance package, a non-disparagement clause, and the kind of soft corporate language designed to make a public stabbing sound strategic. I signed nothing that day. Instead, I called an attorney. That saved me. Because once my access was cut, former colleagues started reaching out quietly. An analyst I'd mentored sent me screenshots. A finance manager forwarded internal comments from a budget review. A project lead I trusted met me for coffee and told me Martin had been pushing teams to inflate performance metrics ahead of the international deal. The same deal I had originally scoped. The buyer was an acquisition vehicle backed by Stonevale Capital, a private investment firm known for buying distressed assets, cleaning them up and making a fortune doing it. The press called the deal worth $1 billion. What most people didn't know was that the structure was more complicated than that. Control sat with a private holding entity managed by one person. My husband, Adrian Vale. That Adrian Vale. If you're wondering how Martin and Vanessa didn't know I was married to him, the answer is simple. We kept our lives private. I never changed my last name. Adrian hated publicity, rarely gave interviews, and never attended early-stage meetings. His team handled everything. Most executives only dealt with counsel, bankers, and representatives. Martin had spent months bragging about landing Stonevale money. He'd never once met the man behind it. Adrian and I met a year earlier at a policy dinner in Boston. He was quieter than everyone else in the room, which made him the only person worth talking to. He listened more than he spoke. He asked sharp questions. He noticed when I was exhausted before I said I was. By the time Halston pushed me out, he already knew enough to see I wasn't being paranoid. Still, I didn't want revenge. Not at first. I wanted the truth documented. So I did it carefully. Through my attorney, I turned over emails, draft projections, track changes, and archived reports showing that internal numbers had been cleaned up before being presented to buyers. We found payment trails to a vendor tied to Martin's brother-in-law. We found a recorded voice memo, sent to the wrong person by mistake, where Vanessa laughed and said, "Once signing happens, they can complain all they want. Nobody unwinds $1 billion deal over disclosure language." That one mattered, because it proved intent. Stonevale's legal team opened a confidential review. Adrian recused himself from direct handling and let compliance do what it was supposed to do. Quietly, professionally, without warning Halston. The board wasn't told everything right away. Only enough to delay final execution until the gala night, when Martin had planned to announce the closing in front of investors, press, and partners. Adrian asked me not to go. Not because he was afraid of what they'd do. Because he already knew. "I don't want you standing in a room full of people who failed you," he told me. I remember fastening my earrings and looking at myself in the mirror. "No," I said. "I want them to see I'm still standing." So I went. And for the first 20 minutes, everything was exactly what I expected. Side glances. Whispering. 2 former coworkers avoiding eye contact. One junior assistant mouthing, "I'm sorry," as she passed me near the bar. Then Vanessa saw me. She crossed the room like she'd been waiting for a reason. "Claire," she said, "too sweet. Bold choice, showing up here." I was invited. She laughed and looked at Martin. "That's adorable." Martin stepped closer. "This is a private event. Don't make this awkward." "It already is," I said. Vanessa's expression changed then. The mask slipped. Just for a second. Maybe because I wasn't shrinking. Maybe because she wanted a scene. She grabbed a fresh glass from a passing server, looked right at me, and tipped it forward. Wine hit my shoulder, my chest, my waist, splashing onto the pale fabric like blood. A hush moved through the ballroom. Vanessa raised her brows. "Oops." Martin actually chuckled. And then a man's voice behind them said, very calmly, "I wouldn't laugh." I didn't turn immediately. I didn't have to. I knew Adrian's voice. The room changed before anyone even faced him. You could feel it, like pressure dropping before a storm. Martin turned first, smiling out of habit. Then the smile vanished. Adrian was walking toward us with Stonevale's general counsel, Halston's board chair, and 2 members of the compliance team. No rush. No raised voice. Just absolute control. Vanessa blinked. "I'm sorry, and you are?" Adrian stopped beside me, took the linen napkin from the table, and placed it gently in my hand before answering. "I'm the reason your transfer hasn't cleared." No one spoke. He looked at Martin. "The acquisition vehicle you've been celebrating tonight," he said. "I control it." Martin went white. I saw the exact second recognition hit him. Not because he knew Adrian's face from meetings. He didn't. It hit when the board chair stepped forward and said, "We need you and Ms. Reed in the East Conference Suite. Now." Vanessa tried to recover first. "This is clearly a misunderstanding." Adrian glanced at the wine soaking through my dress. "No," he said. That part seemed very intentional. People were staring openly now. Phones lowered. Conversations dead. Even the musicians had stopped playing. Martin switched tactics fast, the way men like him always do when arrogance fails. "Claire," he said, forcing a smile, "if there's been some personal resentment, I think it's unfortunate that—" "My attorney is already inside," I said. That shut him up. The next hour was not dramatic in the way movies make things dramatic. No screaming. No tables flipped. No security dragging people across marble floors. It was quieter than that. Worse. In a private room off the ballroom, the board was shown the evidence. The altered projections. The concealed vendor relationship. The voice memo. The disclosure omissions. The timeline proving they knew about the issues before the signing event and planned to push the deal through anyway. Vanessa cried first. Not because she was sorry. Because she realized Martin was going to let her take as much of the fall as possible. Martin got angry. Then defensive. Then desperate. He claimed everyone massaged numbers. He said I was vindictive. He said the company would collapse if the deal paused. Adrian listened to all of it and finally said, "Then it should have been built honestly." By midnight, Martin was suspended for cause. Vanessa was terminated before sunrise. Stonevale withdrew the original offer and restructured its approach directly with the board 3 weeks later at a much lower valuation, after emergency governance conditions were imposed. The billion-dollar celebration still made the news. Just not the way they planned. Industry coverage called it an executive integrity crisis. Then came the civil inquiries. The vendor arrangement became a larger story. Martin's reputation disappeared in under a month. Vanessa tried to frame herself as pressured and inexperienced, which would have been more convincing if she hadn't spent years enjoying the climb. As for me, I didn't go back to Halston. That surprised people. They expected me to reclaim a title, an office, some symbolic corner of the building where I'd bled for almost a decade. I didn't want any of it. What I wanted was my name back. My peace back. My own life back. So I started my own advisory firm. Smaller. Cleaner. No performance theater. No fake urgency. I work with companies that understand that trust isn't a soft value. It's infrastructure. Once it cracks, everything expensive starts collapsing. A month after the gala, the dry cleaner told me the wine stain was almost impossible to remove completely. I told her that was fine. I kept the dress anyway. Not because I enjoy remembering what happened. Because I do. I remember standing in front of 200 people while the wrong people mistook cruelty for power. I remember how fast a room can turn when truth finally enters it. And I remember that the moment they tried hardest to humiliate me was the exact moment they exposed themselves. That's the thing people like Martin and Vanessa never understand. They think dignity is something they can take from you in public. It isn't. All they can really do is reveal how little of it they ever had. I walked into that ballroom as the woman they thought they had erased. I walked out of it knowing I never needed their permission to matter. And that was worth more than any deal in the room. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.